starting to talk about, we're in the spring talking about planning for the fall. So it is it is interesting how H-2B works because you got to work so far in advance. This also helps for spring of 2027. As many people probably noticed, the cap for the supplemental visas was a lot more competitive. And it's going to be, I would expect it to be more unpredictable for the foreseeable future. And we've been in this environment before. And so that now what matters in this case is how you can work within the regulations to still lock in your workers, which is possible. But it does take a lot more planning. You have to be very intentional with your planning. And so that's what we're here to talk about. We're talking about how you can plan better, how you can use October perhaps. I need everyone to understand the nature of the numerical cap. And I guess as we start off here, there is an assumption that you're familiar with the H-2B visa. If you're not, I'm happy to get with you and teach you all about it. But the H-2B visa is numerically capped. And the way that it's capped is at 66,000. This is by legislation. So it was originally capped at 66,000. They've never changed this. This is just the statutory cap. And the way that those visas are allocated is based off of the government's fiscal year. So the first day of the government's fiscal year is October 1st, and then the halfway point is April 1st. And they allocated 33,000 for each of those dates. So think of it like this. Bucket 1, 33,000 from October 1st through March 30th. And then bucket 2 is April 1st through September 30th. And that's important to understand because the competitiveness of the caps varies considerably. So for April, for example, 80% of the requested positions could not receive cap subject visas, and most employers are competing for a very small window to access the cap. And it's not only cap issues that are present in April, but it's also DOL processing times, because for the 33,000 available visas, they received 162,000 workers requested, which is significant. This is different, though, than October. The October cap isn't nearly as competitive. It is still competitive in that more workers are requested than the cap could provide, but approximately 31% of the requested positions were unable to receive visas versus in April it was about 80. So the difference is considerable. Now this is the part that's important for people to understand is how the cap works. So, and one of the most crucial questions of that is, when is the cap applicable and when is it not? And whenever it's not, we call that cap exempt. So workers are cap exempt whenever they've received an H-2B visa in that same fiscal year. So think of it as since October 1st. So like right now, for example, if you're sitting here today and a worker hit the cap on October 1st, they're not subject to the cap again until the next October 1st. The other circumstance is if they're in the United States on a valid H-2B visa. Understanding these two things and how they interplay with your business is critical to being able to actually leverage the October season. But by actually knowing them, it does provide some opportunities in a lot of scenarios. I'm not going to just blanket say anyone can leverage the October cap, because that's not true. But it is a factually driven inquiry, and it's one that we're happy to help you out with. But there are a lot of times where companies can leverage the October cap, and that means a few different things. That means that maybe they have different seasonalities for different jobs. Maybe they have different seasonalities for different locations. Maybe they need more people in the second half of the year than they do the first half of the year. There's a lot of considerations that come into play there. But for employers whose operational demands begin in the spring, the October cap can play an important strategic role. But again, this is the important thing, is it does require you to be forward thinking. You can't be reactive. You can't say, oh, I want to be able to leverage the October cap and it's August. It doesn't work that way because it's about a 6-month filing timeline. So you got to be careful of that. Now, the nice thing about using the October cap, though, is because of it not being nearly as competitive as the April cap, it does make it to where you can increase your certainty of access to workers in the spring. So right now is what we're talking about. We're talking about planning now for the next spring. So we see people leveraging the October cap in a number of different ways. So, for example, we've got some clients that are landscaping companies that also do snow removal or holiday light removal, that sort of thing. They've got two distinct jobs, two distinct seasonalities, and they're able to use the October season to bring in workers and then transfer those workers to their landscaping positions. And that's totally fine. You can do that. Then it just has to be two separate jobs. Now, what you can't do is you can't say, hey, I need more landscaping people in the winter, but I also need more landscaping people in the summer, because the job itself has to be temporary or seasonal in nature. But by looking at your business, looking at opportunities within your business, it does help you determine if there is some opportunity for using visas in both parts of the year based off the seasonality of the roles corresponding to that time of year. And we see this with other industries as well. For example, in hospitality, for example, maybe it's a hospitality employer that has a golf course in Florida or a golf course in Arizona, where the season is significantly higher from October through May. Then it gets really hot, people leave, but they have another golf course in New England that is consistently from May until September. We see that as well. So there's a geographic question, there's a job duties question, and all of these things matter because you can file for the October season, and then you have cap exempt workers to transfer to your other filings. They don't have to leave the country for it. You can do it all in the United States. So it is important, but it is definitely a fact-driven inquiry. So if you're someone that wants to consider this approach, then there are procedural things you need to do. The first thing, and one of the most important things, is to actually review your historical H-2B filings. You want to make sure that there's nothing prohibitive from you operating in this capacity. If your prior filing documents would conflict with statements you'd be making to the Department of Labor, you definitely don't want to do that. Operationally, if you just don't have different seasons, then that matters too. Although I wouldn't say that in of itself prohibits you from using the October season. It's still a fact-driven inquiry. But the first thing to do is to do a deep dive into your historical H-2B filing documents. It gives a lot of transparency into how you've used the H-2B program before. And again, just to reiterate the importance of this, the supplemental visas were pretty reliable for the last 3 years. They're not going to be nearly as reliable now. At least they weren't this year. I would not really expect them to come out considerably earlier, for example, next year. So what we want to do is we want to look at your historical filing documents, make sure there's nothing prohibitive there, and then we want to talk to you in detail about your actual operational timelines. What are you doing when? Breaking this out on a monthly basis, what's keeping you busy monthly? This helps inform if you have some opportunities with H-2B cap. If you do, great. If not, then we would certainly tell you. But it is certainly something worth evaluating because it increases the certainty of worker arrivals in spring. So, and then lastly, just evaluate if the October cap, if it fits your needs. And that becomes a cost question. It is more costly to file for October visas because there's just a lot more filings that go into it, USCIS filings, all that sort of thing. but evaluate it just from a business opportunity perspective. How much is this worth to me to make sure that I have the people that I need in spring of 2027, regardless of what happens with the supplemental visas, which I think is a very important conversation to have. And I know that can be tough, but in short, that is really what we're trying to evaluate. And then if you have questions, you can reach out to us. I know I moved pretty quick through that. It's not a very complicated thing. It's not a very complicated thing at a high level to present. It does become pretty complicated whenever you're looking at it on an individual basis. But one thing that I think is kind of interesting is historically, the October season's become more competitive. I mean, whenever we first started doing this, it really wasn't very competitive at all. Over time, though, I think that people have realized that you can use H-2Bs in this way, and it can be very impactful for the business if they know for sure, okay, I'm going to have this many people. It allows you to plan, allows you to forecast, and it doesn't make you vulnerable to the supplemental visas or the April season allocation. So it's certainly an interesting approach. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A. Does this strategy help with moving up in the letters for spring and future years as well? No, not necessarily. But one thing that you could do is instead of applying for April 1st, you could apply for March 30th, and it wouldn't make any difference to you because the workers that you'd be bringing or transferring over would be cap exempt, and then you would be before all of the group assignments that. And sorry, just for anyone that's not aware, what that question is talking about is whenever you file applications on April 1st, you have random group assignments. They're completely drawn out of a hat, and they're like A through F or G or some far letter in the alphabet. And so the question is, if you do this, does it help you get closer to A? And the answer is no, not technically, but you could move your start date up marginally to get out of that altogether. You want to make sure that if you're moving your start date, that it is actually consistent with your operational demands. That's always important. It's always important to make sure that the things that you're telling the Department of Labor are true. But for most employers, I don't really see a significant difference, for example, in data for March 30th versus April 1st. I just don't. So yeah, it does improve your optionality there considerably, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it. The question is, have you been following the progress of certified seasonal program? I've heard they're possibly voting on this before midterm elections. I haven't, but I can certainly look into it. I'm assuming that is some sort of legislative change for visas. I'm generally very cynical that any kind of immigration legislation that's significant is going to pass. Occasionally, you'll hear me come on here and be like, oh, I'm actually not that cynical about this one. I'll look into that one. I just find that immigration is such that the political parties have such different priorities with actually reforming anything related to immigration that it makes it too convenient of an issue to have to where they don't really want to solve it. It's a really weird dynamic. But I'll definitely take a look at it. Sounds interesting, but I have not been following the progression of it. I also don't know if it would also have to get through, assuming that this is a legislation, it would have to get through the House and the Senate. And we've seen plenty of immigration legislation get through the House. It's usually the Senate that becomes the problem because it's just you need a filibuster-proof majority, and it's hard to get. It would be hard to get. And I guess in this case, it would be probably, it would probably end up being 8 or 9 Democrats to join the Republicans. That's usually pretty tough to do, but I'll be happy to look at it and send out a note about it. I think it sounds interesting.
So there was a follow-up question from Michelle. Would you still need to file for spring to maintain the cap exempt?
Oh, sorry, Michelle. I did not see that. I guess there is that follow-up question feature that I probably should have expanded on. You still need to file. So you would have a labor certification for October and then another one for the spring. So you would still need to file a new labor certification, yes. And then anyone that has any questions, feel free to email us. Happy to happy to get on a one-on-one call and evaluate what opportunities that you might have with your business. But I appreciate everyone taking the time.